it sort of makes me feel a little bit better about, how things are going there when I get to see, when I see that these actors have had an opportunity to practice their craft and portray this character without all of the makeup. But I really liked the character of Vision in this movie. He was he was really great, and I'm sure we'll get into more of that as the conversation continues. Aaron, what action beat did you think was especially effective?
Oh man, hands down, the moment when Bucky picks up Rocket, and the two of them just go bonkers. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of moments in the movie where I felt like I should just outright cheer, but that was one of them.
Right.
Yeah. For me, and there are a couple I kind of have a hard time choosing. One of the moments when I really did need to cheer was when Cap shows up with the rest of the Secret Avengers to help Wanda and Vision. That was really great.
Yeah. I'm going to cheat again, but the first thing that I wrote down, I was like, it has to be when Thor arrives on Earth, right? Like,
and that was the other one that I couldn't choose between. Yes.
Yeah. But from a story standpoint, and also for setting the tone for the movie, I think the part where Thanos just kicks the crap out of the Hulk at the beginning, it's really important. It's not just cool. Yeah. It's actually really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the echoes of that action like reverberate all through the rest of the movie in really significant ways.
Absolutely.
So let's talk briefly, and this is another thing we like to do, Rob, is that we like to sort of set the movie in the context of the comics. And since Aaron is a research monster, he's going to give us a quick overview of what happened with Thanos in the comics, because the Infinity Gauntlet comic event starts off and he's got all the gems, and we don't really know like the whole process that went into him attaining those. And the Infinity Gauntlet event wasn't even Thanos' first bid for sort of universal domination. So Aaron, give us a quick summary of what Thanos' deal was in the comics and how he came to possess the Infinity Gauntlet.
Alrighty, let's dive right in. So the first time that the Avengers encounter Thanos going after the Soul Gems, the MCU calls them Infinity Stones, but the comics call them Soul Gems until the Infinity Gauntlet event. But the first time this happens, they end up teaming up with Adam Warlock and Gamora and Drax and a number of others to defeat him. And in this particular confrontation, it's actually the actions of Spider-Man who ends up releasing Adam Warlock from inside the Soul Gem that allow Adam to wipe out Thanos, and Thanos dies. But later on, Thanos has an encounter with Mistress Death, where he continues to agree to essentially serve her in balancing out the universe like we see in the film. And subsequently he's hoping to finally win her affection, and so all of this puts him on a second quest for the Infinity Gems that tends to be more well known, because he says to Mistress Death, well, if I get a hold of these and I'm able to utilize them, I can do what you want me to do a whole lot faster. So when he goes on this quest, he ends up, first up, outsmarts a character known as the In-Betweener for the Soul Gem, and then he moves on and defeats another character called the Champion for the Power Gem, and then he goes after a third character, the Gardener, so that he has the Time Gem. And that's where things get a little bit complicated, because he uses the Time Gem to reverse age another cosmic character, the Runner, so that he can get the Space Gem from the Runner, and then takes the baby version of the runner, think, the idea of Benjamin Button, right, and trades the baby version of the runner to the collector, who we've seen in the films. He trades him as an artifact so that he can get one of the gems, the reality gem, from the collector. And then finally, he goes up against the Grand Master, who we've also seen in the films in a little bit of a different iteration, and beats the Grand Master in a game of strategy so that he can have the mind gem. And once he gets all of these, he ends up in a place where he still wants Mistress Death's affections, but realizes that he's actually now above her and more powerful than she is. And at this point, he's in a place where he could force her to reciprocate the affection that he has for her, but it's at this point that he realizes that love freely given is actually what he wants, and having ascended to this level of deity and godhood, it actually ends up being a hollow victory because it prevents him from getting what he actually wants.
So there you go. That's so. Also, Aaron, real quick, tell us about the cosmic cube.
Oh yeah. So the very first time that the Avengers go up against Thanos, Thanos is attempting to. He's questing after the cosmic cube, which in the movies is known as the Tesseract, and we've seen it a number of times. We even see it at the beginning of the Infinity War film, and this is really the first time that Thanos attempts to ascend to godhood. And in this case, he ascends to godhood, and at that point thinks that the cube is no longer of use to him. And then one of the Avengers, the original, Captain Marvel at the time, gets a hold of the cube and smashes it, and that sends Thanos from like deity level back down to normal human body level, and he gets stranded in space, and then he ends up like getting rescued by his ship. I think at that point it's Sanctuary 1, where I think in the movie we see Sanctuary 2. And so that's kind of their first encounter, and then what we just talked about was the second encounter, and Infinity Gauntlet ends up being the third encounter, so on and so forth.
Okay, cool. And that's just kind of important for the context of how Thanos is typically been defeated in the comic books, and
yes.
it has always been because of this hubris, and also what is later on said by Adam Warlock at the end of Infinity Gauntlet, that there's this sort of underlying hidden sense that Thanos himself has of his own unworthiness to
Absolutely.
wield all of these powers, and so he always sort of unconsciously sows the seeds of his own undoing throughout these stories.
It makes you wonder how and if that's going to play out in the next film.
Yeah, let's do all of our speculation at the end.
Fair enough.
After we get through all of this stuff. So I'd like to just I'm gonna just throw out some stuff, guys. Like, chime in if you have anything to add. As we go through this, then absolutely just sort of chime in and take the reins as we go here. One of the first things that I wrote down is that Ebony Maw sounds like a bad televangelist. Like the first things that we hear, other than like Loki's distress call, is Ebony Maw saying to all the people on the ship, like, rejoice. In death you have all become children of Thanos, and your life has found meaning in the balancing of the scales, and it's all of this like nonsense, and it kind of has the same tone to me a little bit of, one of these, sort of Benny Hinn type characters,
Right.
who are just like spouting these platitudes that are utterly, meaningless and disconnected from any actual reality.
I mean, it's definitely intentionally religious, right?
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
I was listening to another podcast where they were discussing this, and they were talking about how, Ebony Maw might be like the priest of this religion, but, Thanos subscribes to this religion, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe isn't as vocal about it in the same way that he is, but he's actually taking meaningful steps to accomplishing the things that, the religion is about. Which I thought was an interesting way to possibly be tying it back to, Mistress Death, but I don't know. I didn't read that far into it, but
yeah. Let's talk about Mistress Death for just a second, because I was 100% ready for Hela to be Mistress Death in the MCU.
John, I am so with you on that. I mean, even though, I wasn't a huge fan of Ragnarok itself, and I know you talked about that in another episode, I was totally, I completely bought in to the idea that they're going to bring her back and she's going to be Mistress Death, and it's going to be great.
Yeah. And I wrote a little piece on More Than One Lesson, just sort of reacting to this and sort of my initial thoughts. And honestly, I think what we have is much, much better than a straightforward adaptation of, like, Thanos is in love with the anthropomorphic embodiment of the concept of death.
Right.
Because that's pretty out there. Like, the idea that he has this sort of, like, Malthusian outlook on the population of the universe, like, that's something that you can get your head around a little bit more than, like, the sort of the gleefully nihilistic Thanos that we usually get in especially, like, the earlier sort of sagas of Thanos. I know he comes to be a lot more nuanced as time has gone on here, but
yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I'm actually glad that Lady Death, or sorry, Mistress Death didn't come into play, just because I thought that it would have made Thanos a lot less relatable.
definitely.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a little esoteric, and then you have the same problem that you've had with so many of Marvel's other villains, where they just seem to be bad just to be bad.
Yeah.
Right. Evil for evil's sake. And, the more compelling villains are always the ones where you're like, oh, maybe he does have a point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is something that we've said a couple of times, that the best villains are the heroes of their own story. And in Thanos, we have somebody who, even though, like, obviously his methods are repugnant, there's something about what he is trying to accomplish that you can get your head around. And when Jeff and I were talking in the last episode, or not the last episode, but a couple episodes ago in Ragnarok, and he sort of wondered aloud, are we going to empathize with Thanos? And I said, I hope we do. And wonder of wonders, like, and Aaron and I were trying to figure out what to call him, because he's not just genocidal. That's way too passé for the level of destruction that he's actually wreaking. So what I came up with was omnicidal, but that's not quite right either, because he doesn't destroy every single thing. So he's like half omnicidal. But this, he's not just like just marauding throughout the galaxy for the lulz. He's, he actually has a mission, and there's a real sense of, like, mission and calling that he has, like, adopted, and he he really feels the weight of this important work that he is burdened with.
Yeah, I love what you said about, the most compelling villains being the heroes of their own story, especially with, as I said, this is really Thanos' movie.
Yeah.
He's the main character of this story, and you get the perspective that he has on the whole thing. And, you know, how you said he's going about this like he wants to bring balance to the universe, but he's going about it in a way that is repugnant, but he knows that it's repugnant. He's not under